I'm going to talk more about Israel in a minute. Excuse me, I just got a cold or allergies. This is how it is. But let's talk about Syria. Okay, Syria is a mess. It always has been a mess. It did have some, it's 73% Sunni Muslim, but it did have some Christians in there, and they got, I think, because of ISIS, basically either killed them all or they all fled. Um, Post-ISIS, this is what I call the post-ISIS era. This book again is goes back to 2015, so we're kind of out of date here. But the Alawites, Bashir Assad is a real monster. He looks very ordinary, but he gasses his own people that disagree with him, and he's backed now by the Russians who have come in. And remember that warm water port I was always talking about? Well, there it is, right there, the Mediterranean. And now they've got their warm water port thanks to Syria. So Syria, and then of course we're next door to Lebanon and Jordan. We'll talk about them too. They're a mess too. Lebanon's even worse. As far as there's always a civil war going on, there's refugees in it. But let's get back to Syria. Syria's wide open. The Kurds have been pushed out thanks to us running away and not backing them. And they're our only line of defense against ISIS. ISIS is hiding out pretty much in Iraq somewhere. They're still there, some of it, and but Assad is still there and in charge. So he's an Alawite, as I said before, a Shiite Islamic sect, and just he uses poison gas on his own people. So ISIS had a time of it. They were there, and they were ruling the most brutal part of ISIS. Had its headquarters floating between Syria and Iraq. So really a trouble spot of the world. I have a neighbor upstairs condo. He calls Syria. He says there's nothing in Syria but dirt and snakes. And he says he'd never go back. And he's from Syria. So you get an idea of how he feels about it. Okay, so let's see if I can find Lebanon. Oh, okay. Well, there's Lebanon again. Well, I'll just talk about it. I don't know, hunting around for PowerPoint. Beirut was at one time the Paris of the Middle East. Outdoor cafes, everybody was pretty much free and easy, and it was just a kind of a vacation spot, if you would, from the conflicts of the Middle East, especially between Israel and Palestine. So Lebanon was doing great, but then they had Iran-backed Hezbollah came in. They had various factions of terrorists running through Lebanon, which were just basically decimated. We lost, I guess, in Lebanon, we lost 400 Marines way back when in the 80s because of a bomb from Iranian terrorists killed in our barracks, killed 400 Marines. So that's something we never got over. So Lebanon is better today, but it's still a mess. And so we'll just leave it at that. And again, we'll move on and talk about Israel. I talked about the 1967 six-day-long war, which they got a lot of territory, and the Palestinian Arab refugees just fled from that area. They're one of the strongest military. They're the most stabilized country in the Middle East, thanks to a lot of us support from U.S. And so Jordan is friendly towards Israel. It's next door, and they're ruled by a king. In fact, the Queen Noor, is an American, and so Jordan has a king and queen, and they're kind of holding on to power best they can. They haven't descended into the nonsense that Syria has, by no means. So they're kind of stable. So Israel has Egypt, which is very stable and somewhat friendly, and Jordan, which is kind of stable and kind of teetering. It could go either way in the future. And Syria, which is a total basket case. And then Lebanon, which is back and forth between civil war. So Israel has to keep up a strong military. Now, the problem with a two-state solution, with the Palestinians having their own state and Israel having their own state, I don't see that ever happening. Jewish immigrants, immigration on the Palestinian lands keeps encroaching on Palestinian lands, and Israel keeps building barriers, walling them off, and so you have um, you have settlers being Israeli settlers being kicked off Palestinian lands, and they come back and do more. So it's a never-ending story. It's eventually going to be the Palestinians are just going to just kind of be totally displaced. I don't see them ever getting a state, and it's just going to be a mess from here on out. There is no solution. Jimmy Carter tried back in the 70s with Sadat, President Sadat of Egypt, and he was because Sadat talked to Jimmy Carter about Israel and two-state solution. He was assassinated. So people that try to do good and try to solve this problem, it ain't going to happen. I don't see it. Not in our lifetime. So good luck to them. I'm sorry, but that's just a sad situation. Now the Saudis of Saudi Arabia, and I have about 4,000 Saudi Arabian followers on my Twitter account. They are very scared to come on Twitter and say anything. They just kind of listen in. And I know they're there because I see the following icon. So if you go on my Twitter account, you go far back enough, you'll see gazillions of Saudis. I don't know why they do. They just kind of like my Twitter account. I don't know any Saudis personally outside of social media, and I don't talk to them. They just kind of post my stuff and leave me alone. Now, that aside, it has the largest petroleum reserve and along in the world, or they say the eastern part of the country, the Persian Gulf, but I think it has the largest petroleum reserve pretty much in the world. Bedouin, they still have nomads running around. It's all desert. Um, they're trying to get their population up to middle class. Uh, they have a huge young population. I mean, just huge. And that's what's worrying the new prince of Saudi Arabia because they have more people than jobs, although they have enough money to send them all to school, to pay for their education overseas. Money is not a problem because they all share in the royal wealth. And that's one of the few rare things about one of these Middle Eastern countries is that oil money, although there's a lot at the top, it gets shared. There's a lot of benefits all the way down to the ordinary man and woman on the street, as it were. So that's what sets Saudi Arabia apart. It is the birthplace of Islam. Uh, People go there for the pilgrimage to Mecca. They're in charge of keeping Mecca. They're in charge of running it. They're in charge of making sure that people basically complete their pilgrimage. That's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. When they go to Mecca, they're very sensitive about people and security or anybody bringing any bombs. In fact, they did have a bomb. Somebody brought in a bomb and blew up the birthplace, I think, um, outside of Mecca in Medina. So, the birthplace of the Prophet Muhammad. Um, so they have crazies that come in there and try to blow things up to start stuff, but it's the most tightly secured. They have the most tightest security in the world protecting that area so people can have their religious experience. And you'll notice how close it is to Iran, their deadly enemy. Remember Sunni Saudi Arabia and Shiite Iran. Iran does not like Saudi Arabia. Iran wants to control Mecca. That's been their goal. They want a piece of the pie, even though it's on Saudi territory. So we're going to see some problems in the future with that, and I think that's not going to ever go away. Now Yemen, that's a failed state. It's just it's gone south. Um, the capital, uh, Aden, 56% Sunni Muslim, 4%, 43% Shiite, as you see. Now here, I want you to look at this. It's called Bab El Mandeb. 40% of the world's export of oil from the Middle East. So that would, of course, that would hurt Iran too, because Iran uses the same waterways, and maybe that's why they haven't done that. But pay special attention. Um, Everything else on here, I'm probably not going to talk about, but Bab El Mandeb is one that I will. And so just know what that is. That's pretty important. Now here we go with Turkey. And Turkey wants to separate itself from the Arab world and let itself be known. It's a modern Islamic state, but it's secular in nature. I mentioned earlier the Roman alphabet was replaced the Arabic alphabet. Monogamy was made law, although there is some polygamy there. But Turkey wanted to make itself more European. That's reverting back because of Erdogan, the new ruler. I have many followers on Twitter of Turkey, and I have a lot of Turkish interest, and they always send me pictures of Turkey, and it looks like a pretty nice place to go. So they are they want to be accepted as more European, a lot of them, but now they're looking back to Islam. There's a fundamentalist section, and then there's a secular section. So it's more of a model of religion and secularism that's kind of back and forth, that's trying to rule. The secularization part, remember, they're a NATO member. We do have about 5 or 6 nuclear warheads stationed in Turkey. We have a military interest in Turkey because of Russia and Iran, and so they are quote unquote allies, although they are acting more and more not like our allies. Constantinople, beautiful city. Istanbul, Constantinople is the ancient capital. Istanbul is the modern capital. It's a beautiful place. I'd love to go see it. I've been invited there many times by my friends on Twitter. I doubt if I'll ever go, and especially I'm not taking my wife over there. It's just too unstable. But maybe one day, who knows? And again, there's the Kurds. Look how much of an area the Kurds control. Turkey wants the Kurds out of there. They can exterminate them, they would. But the Kurds, again, are stateless, just like the Palestinians are stateless, just like the Moroccan Berbers are basically stateless. They're just large tribes of people that bleed over. Like the Moroccan Berbers bleed over into Algeria. The Kurds bleed over into everywhere, Syria, Iraq. They go everywhere. And so there are people in search of a home, and they bleed over into the Central Asian countries as well. I think they bleed over into Azerbaijan. I'm not sure. But that said, we'll just stop right here and finish out with the last lecture and finish this chapter up.